So welcome to the panel. So the topic we're discussing today is how to improve the user experience using, the intent-based technology. Just briefly introduce myself. I'm Jess from Whampoa. So Whampoa is a family office behind the Singapore founding father, Lee Kuan Yew's family. But recently we are, aggressively building the crypto business, including the crypto VC arm. And also we are building a new digital bank, which is a crypto-friendly bank. Yeah.
Hey everybody, I'm Alex Wykoff. I'm the head of product at Airfoil. It's a global design agency. We do product, UI, UX, branding, and whatnot. As the head of product, I'm in charge of Airfoil Labs, which is our internal incubator. So we do a lot of unique projects and try and spin them out into spincos. And every now and again, I convince them to run validators too. My history in tech goes back to Brave. I was employee 21 there. Head of product at Steakfish, so I'm kind of like the Troy McClure of crypto. It's kind of like you might have seen me in this project, that project, another one. Yeah.
Hey everyone, my name's Zach. I work in strategy and operations at Uniswap Labs, which is the inventor of the Uniswap AMM, and then also develops a interface, a mobile app, and an API. I do strategy and operations, so I help our company understand what to do, which is the strategy part, and then how to do it, which is the operations part. I'm based in New York. Before this, I worked at Circle, the stablecoin issuer, in public policy. And then before that, I worked for a US financial regulator.
That's good, thank you. I'm Francesco, I'm part of the developer relation team at ConsenSys. I've been running communities for the past decade. I really understand the pain of developer experience in general, but I think, I'm a big advocate of user experience in terms. That's why stuff like snaps and adding specific functionality that are helping onboard seamlessly users is something that I really care about. I'm advocating also a lot about UI and UX hackathon in the past, and I think that's something that we need to work on, and I wish more people were speaking about consumer-faced dApps and not just infra topics.
That's great. So yeah, moving on, just asking the first really, really general question. What do you think, how the intent user technology can improve the user experience, and can you share some real world examples?
So for me personally, there's one person that works underneath me as my EA, and they happen to be based out of the Philippines. The way that they receive their salary is I take my staking reward from Cosmos, flip it into USDC, and then I have to transfer it from Osmosis over to Polygon, and then from there transfer it into their kind of bank-related crypto account. That is at least 5 different steps I have to go through to do that process. So Intents would dramatically shorten that path for me. And so every step along that way is a chance for something to go wrong, for a mistake to be made, or some kind of complication to occur. And undoubtedly, Intents would just take it down to about a 2-click operation, which would be brilliant.
Yeah, sure. So at Uniswap, I think we think of Intents as helpful for solving user problems generally. So for price, we can talk about price, but our intent system, Uniswap X, helps people get better prices, but it also helps with user problems like not knowing what gas is. So before this panel, we were talking about fully new to crypto users and the confusion that they often feel when confronted with gas, which is very different than how we use financial products normally. With Uniswap X, which outsources your swap to a filler, users have a gasless experience, and we've heard from users that that's a really positive thing, or rather we've heard a lack of negative experiences. And so that's been a critical way we've thought about solving user problems, is by using Intents selectively in some instances when there's a specific user problem that can be solved with Intents.
Yeah, I'm a big advocate of automation specifically, and I think since ECC will officially launch something called the Delegation Toolkit, and is helping delegating rights and action, and also coding logic specific to rewards. And right now it's kind of close beta, but the goal is really to building a specific delegation use case around kind of for example user operation, user incentives, user rewards. And I think that's super exciting. So I think this is also will be one step ahead to help user on a better onboarding. And the other big part, apart automation, is obviously smart accounts and light accounts for dedicated user type of user persona. because I'm also like thinking like in the future we'll have customized journeys, and customized journey means you also like customize like maybe extension or customize specific UI components of your wallet, and so dedicated kind of like user journey for a dedicated user persona that we will have.
Yeah, quite interesting. So we were just talking about, especially for this bull run, we didn't see massive, adoption from the new users, especially for some like projects. They kind of like easily can fundraise like millions. But if you check the on-chain data, probably just hundreds of DAU, right? So currently I think the one of the major problems and issues being discussed around the projects and maybe listed on crypto exchanges is how you can get the user acquisition, right? So I just want to hear about you guys, like do you have any solutions, and what do you think, the intent-based technology can unlock the massive adoption?
I mean, my background is primarily in user experience and product management, and so I think a lot about how do you handle the new user problems that you have when you go to market. They tend to be very universal in some ways. Like, it's about ease of use and solving a real problem. So intent doesn't make that any different. It's just a matter of, does this actually solve a real user problem that they're having in the outside world, right? Like, yep. We've seen kind of time and again in crypto where like we've imagined it's a problem, and we've had this really ornate technical solution, but it didn't map to like a real user problem. And that's just due to a lack of like proper user research, proper design research to like actually engage with people where they are and the kind of work that they're doing. So my answer to that would be like, I think you need to spend more time out in the field and actually listening to users, being in the context of their work and their life, and then trying to match the solution to that, rather than taking a tech-first approach, which we've done for like the past decade.
I want to say that one thing that we discovered a lot is like permissionless innovation. I think this is something that enable much more, let's say, technology like advancement, but also like based on community feedbacks, right? I think like building this kind of like, modular language where people can actually build extension or build feature on top of the extension is something that will shape a lot of like much better like community requests. Like it was like 3 years ago, even before Snap, we had something like 8,000 like open PRs in the MetaMask Snap code. It's crazy, right? And the only way to kind of like tackle innovation and also like what really end users want, or like kind of like activate much more feedbacks. There is not just, hey, give me the feedback, I will implement, is giving tools to the community to build and further extend the functionality of your tooling. So I think that's super important.
Yeah, Jess, I think it's a great question and an important point. And one thing that we take very seriously at Uniswap, because we have so many new users. So one thing that we know about our users is that 2/3 of all Ethereum DeFi users, their first interaction with DeFi is through Uniswap. And so it's something we think a lot about is how do we introduce people to DeFi and the new products and new empowerment they have with DeFi, while also giving them a safe user experience. And I think that the technology can do part of that. And then the way in which it's presented to users, like on the interface, like Uniswap has always had a very simple interface where there are a lot of things that you can do in swapping, but what seems to be most compelling to people is a very simple, choose the token, choose the quantity, and sign the transaction. And then we can use technology like Intents or like Uniswap X to abstract some of those things away without removing all control, because we don't want to totally abstract the very important decisions that users are making as well. So from a new user's perspective, it's kind of that balance. And then also understanding where user education, without being condescending and saying like, you don't know this thing and you need to learn this thing. We have a customer support team that can answer user questions that is, very highly used. And we have support articles, and we do, marketing and explanations on our social media page. So it's kind of like a holistic approach that does include technology and does include UX, but also includes other components too.
just I'll say quickly, I wish that more crypto had customer support. I'm
Yeah.
very, very thankful that you all do.
Yeah, absolutely. We love our customer support team.
Yeah. Speaking of Uniswap, just Uniswap co-wrote the cross-chain intent, which is endorsed by Vitalik as well. Can you talk about what about those cross-chain intents?
Yeah, for sure. So as many of you know, Ethereum is going through, the roadmap for Ethereum is to be rollup centric. But that has introduced some problems that need to be solved. And one of those is this, what feels like a very fragmented world of different rollups that are kind of the same technology. It's the EVM underneath. But certainly from a user's perspective, it feels very different. And so the standard that you're referencing is called ERC-7683, and it's a framework for cross-chain intents that we hope will be widely adopted, and we're excited about a lot of key leaders in the Ethereum community endorsing it, that will be able to provide a unified experience for cross-chain interactions. And so right now it's for swapping. It's a description of how to lay out, from a technical perspective, an intent that is cross-chain that everyone can use. But the intention was to solve this problem in the Ethereum scaling roadmap, which is, we have a lot of rollups. It is helping Ethereum scale. It is not taking, but it is migrating activity from ETH-L1, which is expensive and slow and low capacity, to L2s, which are fast and cheap and a great user experience. You click swap and it's done. But it requires some additional technical innovation. So that's why we created the cross-chain intent standard. And now companies that are using it, like Across Protocol is the co-author of the standard. You can bridge from Arbitrum to Base in 5 seconds. And that's what a lot of bridges have promised to do, but have not actually delivered on. So we're very excited about ERC-7683, and we'll have our own implementation of cross-chain intents coming out soon.
Yeah, I want to say, one thing is about, I think users are always kind of expecting kind of the same like front end. So when you have like custom components, it's always like tricky. Like with the snaps now, we are enabling also UI components extension, but people are coming and saying, hey, if I'm installing the snap, I have like the fourth bottom, what's happening, right? And the second thing is that I was trying to buy like the DEFCON ticket. I said, I want to buy it on a layer 2. And obviously, like, I wanted to buy on Linea because this is a ConsenSys layer 2. I mean, I understand it was all open sourced, but also like was not that easy for a normal person. And I actually find a bug directly in the open source repo, meaning a lot of people could not probably paid, so they went back to credit card payments. So we're so early on those topics, and cross-chain is definitely like something that we need to tackle on. And I see that definitely like with snaps, adding snaps, like 90% of like those snaps, especially on EVM, people are adding try to BTC support, they're playing with it, but I don't know if they're continuing to play with it. So kind of like even that specific use case, I think is needed more, and not just on payments. I think like we're building a lot of ecosystem that are kind of getting more and more siloed, and not just for users, like I've been doing like developer onboarding for quite a long time, and like just having a top smart contract developer on Solidity, they are accustomed to like Foundry, Hardhat for testing their smart contract. If you're asking them to like develop the same things on Rust, it's another thing. So you will have like devs in another ecosystem that you need to tackle different ways, right? And so I think like there is definitely like a lot of friction on the users onboarding on different layer 2s, but also like we need to take care also like of developer tooling, because I think like, I don't know if you agree or not, but do we have enough like developer tooling across ecosystem that are like interoperable? Yeah.
No, for sure. I think Francesco's making a good point about developers coming along. I think we're kind of in this painful period right now where we still think of chains as very distinct, and so developers don't build for a world that can be technologically enabled as where chains don't need to matter as much with intents or anything else. And so for example, on the Uniswap interface, historically you've had to choose what chain you want to swap on and then choose your token. And that caused a lot of user confusion because they aren't thinking, I want to buy this token on this chain. A lot of our users are coming because they want to buy a token simply. And so what we've done recently is the chain dropdown is like, I mean, this is like, you probably love this stuff, but like it's like a very subtle design decision to show the chains as a little bit of a less distinct concept to kind of help users kind of make that still available to users if they want to make that choice or if they know kind of that they want to make that choice, but focus it more around tokens. But one thing that we saw recently is people still deploying tokens on multiple chains with the same contract address. And so that is very challenging for users because it kind of, like, the experience is there to target the token and for users to go directly to get a token, but then the developer kind of needs it that once this stuff is like a little bit more mature and works much more clearly, there's also this evolution for developers to be building in a cross-chain way too.
And just if I can follow up real quick. So if I'm understanding you correctly, you're making the argument that intents will enable, especially cross-chain intents, would allow and facilitate chain abstraction. So you're starting to the specificity of like which chain you're operating on will start to fade to the background, and it's really I just want this token for this activity, and solve the rest of it for me in the background. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think ideally, as long as you're not obscuring important differences, if they exist, right? But if they are all settling, like it wouldn't be appropriate, I think, to, I don't want to pick on it, but like if you had chains of differing characteristics, you might still want to show the existence of those differences to people. But certainly in the Ethereum realm, I think if everything sells to Ethereum and has the same security properties, same decentralization properties underlying, then yeah, certainly would want people to be building in that way. And intents can be one, I think, are a very powerful way to get that experience. Not the only way, but a very powerful way for sure.
And sorry, I got just one more. I'll keep it quick. So the solution that you're intending, right, this pending ERC, does it use off-chain solvers? And if so, I'm also curious about what are the kind of implicit security risks when you're moving those kind of activities off-chain? Because it would seem like you're kind of creating a secondary mechanism for people to front-run or do different things, but just do it in a much more sneaky way.
Interesting. What kind of problems are you thinking of?
So like front-running in particular, but like the solvers are supposed to provide an optimal solution, but at the same time, it takes time to create the solution and present it back. So if you're creating effectively a shadow mempool, aren't you exposing the user to more risk rather than less?
Yeah, so this is great. This is a great question. I think that, so the way we handle it is through technical innovation. So the way we handle for Uniswap X, for example, is that it uses a Dutch auction. So what happens is there is a price that's set that is set by the AMM. So it's so you go to the Uniswap interface and you say, I want to make this swap. What we do is we say, okay, if you want to use Uniswap X, we can send your order around to different people, to different solvers, and then give them an option to provide a better price for you, right? So, and then it uses a clever auction mechanism to slowly decrease the price so that, and then the fillers fill it. And we measure price improvement for users over the core AMM. So it's not quite, while it may seem like, it's not quite the same as creating another mempool, is the point. With the use of, with certain smart contract designs and with the design of the economic auctions by a team that understands this kind of stuff, I think that's how you get rid of the security concerns. It's not exact, it's not, it's not the same as a private mempool for sure. But those do exist, and it's not something that we use at Uniswap.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I just wondering, right? So currently, a lot of TradeFi, including our family offices, we want to buy, either crypto, like buying Bitcoin or Ethereum, also the other asset management firms, Fidelity, you name it. They have a lot of allocations on crypto, but they barely, deploy their crypto on chain, which is the DeFi, DApps, or even doing the farming, cross-chain stuff. But what do you see if this is one of the opportunities, Uniswap or MetaMask would like to explore to streamline the complex financial products and provide the solutions for them?
Yeah, I can mention, obviously with MetaMask Institutional, we are kind of solving a lot of those issues for bigger size client and funds and asset managers. Because for example, you need like 7 or 8 steps to getting a loan on Aave today as a kind of like a normal person, right? And what happens with MMI was all this kind of like costume journey were pre-built. So meaning like instead like 7, maybe you need 2, right? But the most important part is not just the tech side, it's also like the certification, the regulatory side, right? So I think this is also like a big part of the game here. Like if you're like playing on another kind of a size with other kind of like stakeholder, it's not anymore like a single transaction. Like, so you need to take care of different things. That's why, for example, within MetaMask Institutional is done properly with like, you know, different other like stakeholder in the market.
Yeah, the way we address this at Uniswap is by providing the functionality of our app in the form of an API. So that people who are serving institutional clients, like maybe developers in this room, they can integrate the Uniswap X API, and then they can build that into the system that they're already building for institutional clients. So we have a partnership with Talos, which is our first client for the Uniswap X API. They focus on professional firms. It's mostly people who are doing centralized exchange market making and buy-side firms, I guess we would call them, who are purchasing crypto, who haven't yet had access to DeFi because it's more complex than centralized exchange. It's also, as you know, if you're a large office who has like a lot of risk requirements or regulatory requirements, then you're not able to, or you may not be able to. Our core product that we make for normal consumers like you and me is maybe not the best product for those clients. And so what we've done is the same functionality that you get in the app is available as an API, but Talos is able to use that API to surface, to make DeFi trading available to their users in the requirements and in the interface that those people demand. So instead of like fragmenting our core product or like making, you know, really hard trade-offs that maybe make it difficult for our current users, we empower other businesses to serve those users, but still get the great access to DeFi that Uniswap provides.
So actually, Uniswap can be the infrastructure provider to allow like builders and developers to build their own UI UX based on the technology you have.
If we rebrand, yeah, I mean, if we rebrand as an infrastructure provider, I mean, we could raise a lot of venture capital. So maybe that's a good way to go. But no, I mean, I think it is. We do think about Uniswap as infrastructure for sure. Certainly, the smart contracts are that way, and so we've built it in a very specific way. Immutable, for example, is really important for us. But with Uniswap v4, for example, I mean, I think that is definitely developer infrastructure. So that allows developers, in the same way that snaps allow developers to build an arbitrary functionality to MetaMask, Uniswap v4 allows people to continue to innovate on AMMs as they have been, but to do so in a safer way, because we've seen so many Uniswap forks that change one thing in a really, really complex code base, and then their users get hacked. And so we saw that user pain. But we also saw, we want to spur innovation. We want the industry to grow and do new things, but to do it safely. And so Uniswap v4 has that functionality where it allows people to build a custom, it's called a hook, and build a custom AMM, a wholly new AMM, but using the core swap logic that is like very hard to get right and can be very insecure if you do it wrong. And so I think that's the infrastructure on the smart contract side. With the API, for sure, allowing people to serve a huge amount of users that are different from I think the Uniswap user base right now is very crypto native, relatively sophisticated because they have to understand how blockchains work when it's still early. And so we want to continue serving those users. We're continually making product improvements for that. But for new kinds of users who maybe don't fit in that bucket or are not in our strategic roadmap to serve, the Uniswap X API is critical infrastructure for doing that.
Yeah, I know. I want to say I really see a lot of wallet, like you say, wallet specific, like same functionality, wallet copy, like for specific like use case. I definitely see that that's not the way or the path forward for like wallet adoption or like, let's say, wallet continuous development. That's why like I think like Snap's opening kind of like this kind of like tech stack to community developers, product companies, like to build and further functionality is definitely something that I'm excited about. And then second thing is that I don't know enough, but MMI build the adapters, right? All the MMI adapters. I think Uniswap also built an adapter. They're basically open source pre-built hooks for enterprise to use, and it's something that is super interesting. And I think like different companies build. We have something like 60 adapters on top of like what MMI provide, and they're also like fully open source.
I have nothing good to add on that one.
Yeah, do you have any other questions to ask?
I'm definitely interested in this is a totally orthogonal kind of question, but I'm more interested in like the error cases, right? We're adding a lot of complexity under the hood, and we're intentionally obfuscating it from the user experience. Yet, there's no shortage of problems that can go wrong in terms of you're in the middle of a transaction, but there's like multiple steps along the way where a trade becomes invalid or a bridge fails. And so I'm kind of curious, since you're working so hard to obfuscate that complexity, well, what do you do when an intent fails in the middle of the path? How do you expose that to the user and help them to kind of like diagnose, debug, and retrieve their funds? Like, on what side of the bridge do you tell them to go?
Yeah, from the Uniswap perspective, I think this is why we say intents are not a panacea, because I think we don't subscribe to the view that you should take like an incredibly complex financial transaction and make it into like a single thing that encompasses a lot of things. For what, in part because of what you described. So with Uniswap X, it's a very specific single action that the searcher or the filler can provide, which is essentially an ERC20 token transfer. And the smart contracts that underlie that, again, getting back to technical innovation, like, what Uniswap has always done, I think, is to provide good user experiences that are anchored in technical innovation. So for Uniswap X, the way we build the smart contracts is that the transaction is atomic. So it can't get stuck in this intermediate stage, because if one thing fails, first of all, it's only one action, which is an ERC20 send, and then if it can't fail in an intermediate state because of the way in which we're building the smart contract. So it's definitely something we think about a lot, and I think the way we approach it is, again, not trying to abstract too much complexity, but doing it in a selective way and using intents when they make sense, and in narrow ways that are appropriate to the problem that's being solved.
Yeah, I think this is a good question. I also want to make sure that people understand that we are abstracting specific, like let's say, technical feature for onboarding better users for this target persona, but we are not solving the fact that we are creating more kind of like single point of failure. What I'm saying is that you will still always have one main account owning and delegating the rights to do something, right? So you still have like a self-custodial like owner, right? How you're kind of managing security, that's another like side of the medal. But what I'm saying is that, yes, we are abstracting, but let's also make sure that I think one big part that we need to do, it's like educating kind of like this main stakeholder, and the main stakeholder kind of like owning kind of like this, like could be also like different, could be from enterprise to single contributors, but this will still remain there, right? Like delegating account rights, you will still need someone that delegate and kind of like have kind of like ownership of something of some value, right? Doesn't need to be monetary. I see especially like in privacy or like ZK proofs business models, right? Like you will still like own proofs, but you will always have a single registry that we actually like have the responsibility to grant proof and specific like attestation. That's why like I think the first things that we need to think about is like building in the open source so that everybody can actually prove our code in any time, really understanding what's going on, right? And I think one of the biggest use cases, and then we move forward, is the kind of like attestation registry. Attestation registry need to start to be like really open source, like services like TPS, TPS like verifiers. If you look at layer 2's landscape today, it's a lot of claims around TPS. It's not fully open source, right? That's why I appreciate a lot of the company that are going like fully open source with their test frameworks.
Which layer 2s are not open source, or what's not open source with layer 2s?
The verifiers of like, for example, when someone is claiming, okay, we're doing 20,000 TPS, Like they have internal testing frameworks just for them, and then when you ask the question, are you guys open sourcing your test framework? The answer is blah 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 something. Because I wish like I could find a good testing framework, open source, and is testing all actually like layer 2 on a kind of like on a transparent way, right? But I think so we are moving in that direction. I think there is a lot of pressure also for a single company to do that. But that's also like one thing we just need to stay true to the ethos that building in transparency and enabling the community to build feature on top of your tech stack. And then we're going back to the modularity kind of like concept, right? That we need that more, because a single company cannot build a solution that will satisfy a long-term community.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, Alex, I have a question for you. Since you're the professional of enhancing the user experience, can you share some like experience of how like when you're working with those crypto projects?
Sure. So in product development, it's kind of, you can think of it like a circle, and you have to kind of choose when do you want to enter the circle. So if you're trying to build something completely new that really has not gone out in the world before, starting with design research and user research makes sense before you build the first thing. It's going to land you a little bit closer to the bullseye. But the other thing that we heard from both Uniswap and from MetaMask, right, is you can also just build something and then get the feedback from the user, and then use that to drive your next kind of wave of innovation.
Evolving.
Right, and so that's an iterative approach. There's a fundamental assumption that your first step was in the right direction. There's another assumption that like you can iterate very quickly, but both paths work, right? If you're talking about improving the user experience for crypto specifically, you have to take into account like way more factors than you do in the Web2 land. The nice thing is about the blockchain is it's hard to lie. So like you were saying earlier, it's like, all these chains were kind of popping off, but like on-chain activity was like really low.
Yep.
There's a reality to that. And so, for example, when I was working at Stakefish, we made a kind of, they hate to use the word pooling, but it was a pooling mechanism for people with less than 32 ETH that they could spin up their own validator, right? You look at the kind of, website analytics, who's showing up to the web page, and then you look at the on-chain analytics, what's actually happening in the smart contract. And you have to use that as a determination of, okay, what do we need to change? Or do we need to kill the project entirely? Like that would be one example, right? Yeah. But in terms of like actual mechanism or kind of method, contextual inquiry is the thing I lean on the most when I'm like sitting side by side with somebody and like watching them work. You learned a ton that way.
Okay.
Yeah, and then the other thing I lean on a lot is what's called the think aloud protocol. Otherwise, engineers are really familiar with it. They call it rubber ducking, right? So you got a little rubber ducky next to your screen. You talk to the rubber ducky. What are you doing, right? When you get a user to speak out loud when they're trying to execute some kind of work, when they go silent, you know that they've entered a challenge point. You can stream out your thoughts very easily, but once your brain has to work, you watch them go silent every single time. You're like, oh, that's the part I need to fix. It's a cue every single time. So that's the kind of stuff I lean on, just methodically. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's all today for the panel. Thanks for joining the panel, and hopefully everybody's enjoying this panel. Thank you. Thanks for your time.